Ohio State may have already found its next freshman star on defense. And no. I'm not talking about Jay Timmons. I'm talking about another defender who flashed in the weekend scrimmage. He made a few really good plays. In fact, lost his black stripe pretty much immediately afterward. And when Ohio State held its first major scrimmage of fall camp, Khary Wilder's name kept coming up when people close to the program talked about the defense. He was disruptive, and apparently it wasn't some random one day explosion. The staff was already been seeing this coming in practice, and he isn't the only one encouraging defensive development. In this episode of the Buckeye Huddle podcast, there are four things, sorry, four things from this first scrimmage and Ryan Day's comments that I think tell us a lot about this new look Ohio State defense and where it is headed. Obviously, Khary Wilder is forcing his way into the conversation. Pierce is another one who may be emerging as the guy this defense can truly build around. Earl Little Jr. looks like he may have already settled one of the biggest questions in the secondary, and at linebacker, Ohio State may be planning to play a lot more guys than most of us expected. That matters because the expectations around this team are quite frankly ridiculous. To lose as many players as they lost and to have as many players coming in as they have coming in, Ohio State is the number one team in the preseason AP poll. Some fans may like that. Some fans may say they don't like that, and I get it. I appreciate the recognition. But at the end of the day, you got to make it happen on the field. And of course, one of the reasons is because fans look at Ohio State and how much money they spend. According to the 24/7 Sports CBS Sports Industry roster spending report they put out at the very end of last week, Ohio State $40 million plus tier along Oregon in the Big Ten. The exact figure is an industry estimate, an audited payroll or anything like that. But the point here is obvious. The roster is funded to compete for a national championship, not in the future. I mean, they are in the future, but also right now. So guys playing well and awesome, nice, but expect this, right? Young guys becoming championship level answers is exactly what is supposed to happen. It's exactly what matters most for the Ohio State Buckeyes. You have everything for you, but the way Ohio State spends it and how smart they are, it should be happening because they have some of the best people in the country making that happen. So I'm John Rhodes with BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you'll find deep Ohio State coverage, elite recruiting intel, and none of the toxic noise. Let's start with my first takeaway, which I already told you about, is Khary Wilder, and he's getting hard to ignore. So let's start with the freshman. There are different kinds of August hype that can be out there. There is the kind where a coach gets asked about a freshman and says something nice because, well, what else are you supposed to say? Yeah, this kid got recruited. He's terrible. We really regret this. What? Nobody's going to be saying that, right? It's not particularly going to even make you get even more good recruits too. Then there's the kind where a player's name starts showing up repeatedly without, trying to force the conversation. And that's much more interesting. And those are the guys you got to look for when Ryan Day talks to the media. And according to one person that I was talking to about the post game of the scrimmage and kind of what people saw who were when they talked to some other people and including what they saw, Wilder was a name that came up off disruptive in the scrimmage. He had his black stripe removed after. Most importantly, he had a performance that was consistent with what the coaches had already seen him doing during practice. That last part is where my ears especially perked up. One great Saturday can happen. Freshmen are talented. Someone wins a rep, that's great. But somebody gets loose, and that's awesome. Everybody gets excited. But the scrimmage is confirming a trend that was already. Now we have something worth watching here, and here's where the happens. How quickly can Wilder become useful? Not just a starter, and not going to be the next Chase Young right away. I mean, could he be? Sure. Maybe. Probably not. But I don't want to put the ceiling on anybody. But he could be something right away for this team, and the something he needs to be is useful because Ohio State does not need him to play 60s plus snaps a game. They have other veterans and guys like that. If Wilder becomes a guy Matt Patricia can trust for 10, 15, maybe 20 snaps in the right situation, that helps the entire defensive line. You can keep veteran edge players fresh. You can create more competition. You can give offenses another pass rusher down for, and maybe, just maybe, by November, the role is larger than it was in September. Khary Wilder is starting to become one of those freshmen you can't just dismiss as August hype. And here's why. After Ohio State's first major scrimmage, multiple conversations about the defense kept circling back to Wilder. He was disruptive. He lost his black stripe after practice. But the most important detail is that the scrimmage apparently did not surprise the coaches. They had already been seeing signs of this in practice, and that changes the conversation. One good scrimmage, like that can be a flash and that could be nice, but repeatedly putting on the field, showing up, is actual development. Now, I'm not telling you, he's about to start and become Ohio State's next superstar defensive end as a freshman. That would be ridiculous to say this early. I mean, while it'd be really cool, it would be ridiculous to say this early. But if Wilder is already earning enough into the rotation as a freshman, Ohio State just found something incredibly valuable, another legitimate pass rush option without having to go shopping for one. And on a team trying to win a national championship right now, that truly matters. So this takeaway is, number one, do not crown Khary Wilder yet, but absolutely start paying more attention to him. The evidence has gone beyond just one coach's compliment. He is beginning to force his way into the conversation. Let's look at takeaway number two, which is Pierce, maybe the defensive anchor of this team. Now, let's go from the unexpected name to the guy I think maybe becoming one of the most important players in the entire defense. And he wasn't necessarily completely dead, obviously. People knew his name and he was going to come in, but you did get a lot of other big names. Riley Pettijohn, Christian Allegro, transferred in, and Peyton Pierce, while he was somebody that's been on the team that James Laurinaitis has trusted a lot, he was also somebody that kind of got forgotten at times. Needs somebody to replace the production of a Sonny Styles and an Arvell Reese. Those guys are amazing. Those guys have incredible upside and ceiling. Peyton Pierce, nothing against him, but he didn't really have that kind of hype with the team. And I think they're with the fans. And I think that is a huge mistake, because who's the guy everybody trusts? Who's the guy where they know where he's going to be? Who's the guy that lines everybody up? Who does the boring things correct consistently that everybody else can play faster? I think that's going to be Peyton Pierce. One person I talked to who watched the scrimmage described Pierce as one of the best players on the field. And that came on a day when the offense was unbelievable, and what they talked about it in the press conference with how well they were executing. The talk about Peyton Pierce is that he just does his job well. You don't necessarily have to worry about him not doing something right, not doing, what he's supposed to do, not filling his gaps and doing those things. He does his job well. And that t-shirts like that's not going to get on a t-shirt anytime soon or anything. So it's not exactly the most exciting quote in the world, but for a linebacker, that might be one of the best things you can hear, especially a green dot guy, middle linebacker that you look to be a leader on the field, because linebackers who make mistakes get exposed very quickly. You get in the wrong gap, and that 6-yard run becomes a 25-yard run. If you got bad eyes, the tight end fakes the block and he's running free up the field. If you're late to diagnose what's going on, now you're chasing instead of attacking. And this is where Pierce's value could become bigger than its own statistics. If Matt Patricia and James Laurinaitis trust him to consistently diagnose plays and be where he is supposed to be, that allows them to get more creative around him. Blitz somebody else, rotate a safety in, play another young linebacker with specialized skill, change the front, because somebody in the middle is the whole thing from turning into chaos. One thing you could have about Caleb Downs was he was always in the right spot, always did his job, always did the right thing. Smart players like that obviously get a lot of hype when you're Caleb Downs, but Peyton Pierce, I think, should be getting some of that hype as well. I'm not going to do the thing where I compare him to Caleb Downs, but I am going to do the thing where he's the type of guy that's going to be out there, know what he's time performant, and he can remain consistent and reliable for the coaches. The most important player on Ohio State's defense might not be the guy making the flashiest plays. It may just be Peyton Pierce, one of the best players from the scrimmage this weekend, and describing him as he just does his job well. That is absolutely enormous, because if the middle linebacker sees things quickly, fits the right gap, anybody in line, the defense around him gets faster. Matt Patricia can be more aggressive. Young players can get on the field without, the coaches worrying about if they have the right experienced guys around them. Ohio State lost a lot of experience on the field, but I think returning a guy like Peyton Pierce matters a lot for them to be able to diagnose plays quickly, getting the play calls into him, having the play calls be communicated to the other players. Those are the mental of a guy that's not just the athletic stuff. Obviously the athletic stuff is great, but can be so much more than athleticism. Can be a communicator, can be a smart football player who does what he's supposed to do. Takeaway number 3, Earl Little Jr. may have already won the safety job. Now, obviously, a lot of safety jobs to look at here. There's not just one safety job, but this third takeaway is probably the cleanest depth chart development we got. Earl Little Jr., heard a lot about him in the spring, and for good reason. He's been doing well in fall camp too. When Little arrived, there were legitimate questions about where Ohio State would ultimately use him. And with the talk about Jay Timmons at nickelback and stuff, there's people thinking, well, could he maybe not be starting? Could he maybe not be your nickel? But based on what I've heard about the scrimmage and kind of what he's done in camp so far, this situation may already be sorting itself out very, very quickly. Little continues to have a strong fall camp, and after initially being an option at nickel, he appears to have locked down the second safety spot alongside Jalen McClain. Now, notice the wording, appears to, okay? I don't want somebody to clip this and be like, John saying that he's got the safety spot. He appears to be there. We'll wait and see what actually happens against Ball State. But Ohio State has not released some, ceremonial decree declaring that he is the starting safety alongside Jalen McClain. But Ohio State does feel very good about Earl Little from what I was told. So I don't want to turn reported camp momentum into, the official depth chart, but I do want to give you the kind of the idea here that Earl Little is somebody they feel very good about on the field alongside somebody like Jalen McClain. Those two guys back there could work very well, because safety was one of those positions where Ohio State did need clarity, right? McClain gives you the established piece. If Little separated himself enough that the staff increasingly sees him at the other safety spot, that starts giving the secondary shape. And there is another part of this that I like. His nickel, or at least the fact that Ohio State considered him there, tells you something about the versatility of him too. A modern day safety cannot just stand 15 yards deep and wait for the ball. He may have to run, he may have to cover a slot. He may have to fit the run, blitz, rotate the snap, handle motion, play man cover, these things. So if Little has enough coverage ability to have been considered at nickel, but is playing well enough to win a safety job, that potentially gives Patricia flexibility without substituting. And this is where spending comes back into the conversation. If Ohio State sitting at number 1 on the AP poll as it was today and operating with a $40+ million roster, the is not merely that you have talented players. Everybody knows Ohio State is talented players. The expectation is that those players and those pieces actually together. A high-priced roster is great. Ask Texas A&M, you're going to have a lot of talent. But if you can't fit those guys together, if you can't get a high-priced roster full of 5 stars that cannot define their roles, and that's an expensive collection of diamonds that you can't wear together. I don't know. I'm not great with fashion, so I'm just trying to think of some kind of analogy here. But a championship roster has answers. A championship roster has roles, and Earl Little may be becoming one of those roles. And I think with the versatility here, like normally I don't love to talk about that stuff, as much, but I do think it's important to talk about here Earl Little, because Matt Patricia is somebody that's not just going to play his 11 starters out there. He's going to be rotating a lot. You saw what he did in New England. You saw what he wanted to do there all the time by really crafting the defense against every single team they play. With guys with versatility like Earl Little, you have those kind of answers. Obviously, Matt Patricia, he's going to have his staple players that are in there pretty much every single time. And I think through the conversations I've been having, Earl Little sounds like he's becoming one of those staple players, not just a piece in for certain teams, but one of those staple players that they can rely on a lot. Finally, takeaway number 4, linebacker may be a rotation and not just a two-man job. And now we're getting to the takeaway, I think, a schematic impact. We talked about this a little bit before fall camp, and I'm feeling vindicated now, okay? Ohio State might not view linebacker as 2 starters and everybody else waiting their turn. Ryan Day was asked about Peyton Pearson and Christian Allegro, the 2 guys expected to start, and instead of just, beginning there and saying, oh, yep, these guys had a great camp, we love them, great job, start talking to TJ Alford, Riley Pettijohn, and then he mentioned Garrett Stover, and that's very interesting. They said those younger linebackers are doing good work, including on special teams, and the special teams performance can lead to defensive playing time. Then he talked about Pierce and Allegro being, and finally, he said something I think matters a whole lot. Listen to this here. This is what he said. I think you will see us rotate guys and try to figure out how all these pieces work. Boom. That is exactly the type of rotational depth we were talking about in the preseason. And I got to be honest, I got to run a victory lap here for a minute, because I just did an episode last week where I was like, hey, the guys that we were wrong about, man, I got roasted in the comments. You guys were like, of course, wrong about everything. And not wrong about everything, being transparent about what we weren't sure about and what we were kind of speculating on. And now we're looking at what were we right about, and this is something we're going to be right about. Obviously, we'll see it actually happen on the field, but that seems to be the sentiment coming out of fall camp right now, is that the linebacker position is deep, and this matters a lot for them to be able to play some depth. So this isn't like coach speak saying we like our depth. It sounds like an actual plan, and the reason is because they have different skill sets. They specifically pointed out that Alford, Allegro, Pettijohn, and Pierce do not bring the exact same thing, and that can become a massive, massive weapon for the Buckeyes as they continue to look through options. And if Ohio can actually have 4, maybe 5 linebackers it trusts, this defense can change its personality based on who it is playing without changing the entire scheme. That could be a much bigger advantage than just simply naming 2 starters and rolling with those 2 guys like we saw last year. Think about what this allows against different opponents. Think about what this allows in the playoffs. You played these 2 guys a lot in the Big Ten. You get up against a Miami or somebody like that in the playoffs, and suddenly you're seeing looks and formations that you didn't really see on film before, because you have so many different options. So one week you're dealing with a physical run game and maybe some more size. Next week it's an offense putting backs and tight ends all over the formation. Speed matters, and then it's 3rd and long, and maybe you want your best pressure or coverage combination in there. The best defenses do not just simply have depth, they have usable depth. There is a difference there. Depth is having somebody available when the starter gets hurt. Usable depth and somebody into a game on purpose because his skill set gives you an advantage. And Day's comments suggest Ohio State, it may have that. Now, I need to give a preseason optimism warning here a little bit, okay? I love talking about all the great stuff, but we are only 9 practices in. I don't think they practiced today. 9 or 10 practices in at this point, but Day himself acknowledged this. There's plenty left to learn, left to figure out. We still got a week or 2 of camp ball prep, and then you have some Texas prep in there, obviously, as well. So we're declaring this, the deepest linebacker room and all this stuff. It's great talk for August, but the evidence is encouraging. We still need to see it on the field, because the staff is not like it desperately trying to identify 2 players it trusts. It's talking about how to use all the pieces, and this is much better. And this is a much better problem. So when I look at Ohio State's first scrimmage defensively, I don't think the biggest story is whether the offense won the day or not. I care much more about what was revealed underneath that. Khary Wilder, Peyton Pierce, Earl Little Jr., and the linebacker depth for Ohio State looking like a real weapon for Patricia and Laurinaitis. That is what August is supposed to reveal, not who won a practice scoreboard or anything like that, but who is becoming the most trustworthy. Ohio State is going to be number one in the preseason. They need to be number one at the end of this season as well. The standard is not pretty good defense. The standard is championship defense. And after the first real live test of camp, there are at least 4 reasons to believe some important answers are starting to emerge. So thanks for joining me here on the Buckeye Huddle podcast. Please do like and subscribe and check us out over at buckeyehuddle.com. Me, Connor, TJ, Mark Givler, Kevin Noon, Andrew, all the dudes over there that you'll love to talk to on the board. We appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.